All right, thank you, Caitlin, and hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're at. For the next 50 or 55 minutes, we're going to talk about Dynamics GP and why you might want to consider upgrading. Kind of the assumption is you probably have a version of Dynamics GP today, and so some of you, if you're brand new, if you haven't seen the product before, you'll get a look at some screenshots of it, but for the most part, kind of assuming that you are on an older version and possibly looking at upgrading to something more current. Okay, so let's jump right in. And the first, there it goes, a little bit of a delay there. The first thing is really the agenda. So what are we going to talk about? Well, why upgrade? So I might just say, why not upgrade? So leave it at that. But it's always kind of fun to have the latest and greatest as far as feature functionality in the software. Spend most of our time on what the new features in GP 2018 are, and then touch on some system requirements for the new version and look at the roadmap. And I've got the system requirements kind of up front, so my agenda here is a little bit out of order, but we should be able to get through everything on the list there in the next hour. And so GP 2018, the original version, if you have it, or maybe some of you have installed it onto a test machine, but the original version is 18.00.0302, and the official release version that you should be getting today is 18.00.0400. And so if there's anybody that downloaded it early, it actually came out December 1st, and so if you actually went and grabbed it the first part of December and installed it, you probably have the 0302 version, but the current version, there was a January hotfix released, and so the current version would be the 0400, and so probably nobody has gotten that far with it, but just in case. Okay, so system requirements, a couple of changes from early on from what Microsoft had released. Of course, we know everything pretty much runs on Windows 10, backward compatible to Windows 8 or 8.1, and they were stopping right there. And so our initial discussions were, and if you happen to be at any of our fall 2017 customer events, you probably saw this slide, and might have been me telling you that you had to be fairly current on Windows. Once they actually shipped the product on December 1st, they did relax the system requirements a little bit, and they are going back to pick up Windows 7. And so they snuck that in right at the last minute. They might have done a query on the database of all Windows users and found out that many people still run Windows 7. Very few people run 8. Some might run 8.1. Many run Windows 10. And so you might have seen early on even information from us that Windows 7 would not be supported, but it is in fact supported with Dynamics GP 2018, either 32-bit or 64-bit. Office versions, something current is generally suggested. The official versions are 2013 and 2016 Microsoft Office that are supported, and again, 32-bit or 64-bit is fine. It runs with older versions. Some things might not work exactly right if you do a lot of reporting in Excel, and Smart List will generally dump stuff out to Excel without any problem, but we're always reluctant to say that it just simply wouldn't work with Office 2010, for example, because for the most part it does, but the official supported versions of Office are 2013 and 2016. Adobe, if you use that, Adobe 10, Adobe X is really the supported version, or newer. And so, a lot of times people have free PDF creators, and those are not kind of technically officially supported by Microsoft, but as some of you probably know, many of those free PDF creators actually work, and so you won't find those in the system requirements, the official version, but since it's free, you can always try them, and if they work, then keep them or proceed. If they don't, then we'd probably point you back to, well, Adobe is really the one that's officially supported, but you know, I personally know many people that use the free PDF creators. If you're running in a virtual environment, of course, this is kind of the same as the Adobe. The official supported virtualized software is Hyper-V, because that's made by Microsoft. And so you can see the server versions there, 2012, 2016 Hyper-V. Most people do not run the Microsoft Hyper-V, and so I haven't personally seen a virtualized product that GP does not run on. VMware is certainly the kind of the go-to virtualization piece of software, and obviously it runs on that. I've seen some off-brand ones that I didn't even know existed. GP's been running many years on those as well, and so kind of like the Adobe, there's an official stance that Microsoft has on what they've tested and can support it on. That doesn't at all mean that it won't work on anything else, and so just kind of playing by the rules here with the Microsoft family. Server side, SQL, this is a little bit of a gotcha for most people. So a lot of folks are running SQL 2008. That's been around for a long time and seems to be pretty prominent out there. GP 2018 isn't supported on SQL 2008, and that is one that you will have to make the change. And so you wouldn't get far even installing it. And so SQL 2014, SQL 2016, pretty much any version, Enterprise Standard or the Free Express version, you will want to upgrade your SQL. And so that's really the only kind of got you about GP 2018 is it does cost most people time and energy and some dollars to upgrade their SQL software. Sometimes that dictates an upgrade to their SQL server. And so kind of, I don't have a slide on this, but if you're in that position, you really want to upgrade, but you're looking at a potential expensive SQL upgrade between hardware and software and putting all that together. It might be a time to just look and see what it might be to move your GP environment to a cloud provider, and it doesn't have to be Microsoft. It could be, but there's lots and lots of data centers around that we bump into over the years, and so that's maybe one consideration. If you have to end up spending a lot of money on a SQL upgrade, it might be a good time to think about, you know, what would this cost if I just gave it back to Microsoft to host or someone else. Okay, so getting into actually why it's a good idea to upgrade to GP 2018. Lots of things here, some that we knew were coming, some that snuck in there that were nice surprises. They've really expanded the document attach feature, and if you use that today, you probably enjoy it. If you don't use it, it might be something that you could take a look at. It's been in the software since version 2013, and so very nice enhancement over the old kind of document attach feature, which wasn't bad, but the new way they've done it is so much better. So lots of money spent on that. They've really spent a lot of time on user testing and trying to enhance the user experience, which means making things more efficient. So how do I get to the data with fewer clicks? How do I get to more data from a single screen? Things along that line that make us more productive in the operation of the software. Over on the right side, they're constantly making changes to the workflow. So they're constantly enhancing the workflow engine. And so GP 2018 brings this kind of Workflow 4.0, which they've done some nice things with here. You'll see in a few minutes as well. If you don't use the workflow part of Dynamics GP, might be something you look at. There's probably one or two things in there that you would find helpful. Not everybody uses all pieces of it, of course, but there are some pretty nice things that are available to us today. And then, of course, they went through the financial system, which is generally meaning general ledger, bank rec, receivables, payables, kind of the core accounting part of the software, and added a number of things there for us, and a few things around HR and payroll. So, and we're going to take a look at pretty much every single one of these in one form or another. And then Power BI, which you probably are starting to hear more and more. Microsoft has kind of hit a home run with the Power BI solution here. And so GP, of course, is hooked to Power BI and allows you to do reporting now in the Power BI space and have your GP data available. And so what that means is GP can be exposed to your account in Power BI, and Power BI is a hosted solution by Microsoft. GP can be exposed to your account so that data can be pulled into the Power BI system, and you could create reports and charts and graphs. And Power BI really, BI, by the way, is business intelligence, and that's kind of a fancy way of saying reporting that is visual. And so, yes, there's times you just want to run a trial balance, you want to run an aging or a profit and loss statement or an inventory list, and so that's all still doable, and you could do that in Power BI as well. But the strong part of Power BI is the ability to take that data and visualize it maybe in a little different format than what you've seen thus far. And so Microsoft has invested heavily in Power BI. They've made a very good investment with the GP hooks to Power BI, and of course that data from Power BI can be brought back into Dynamics GP for the users to view. And so what's that mean? Well, you see kind of in the top left up there, if you take a good look at that, you'll see these charts and graphs and kind of key performance indicators running inside of my Dynamics GP. And so those are Power BI renderings of my data running inside of Dynamics GP. Well, that same data can run from the Power BI website. So if I have somebody that's not a GP user, I still want them to be able to see a chart or a graph or just a simple report. Well, of course, they can do that as well. And so down kind of in the bottom there, the larger report is a report that we did for a casino, and just pulled some of the sample data in and created this report in a couple hours to show them kind of as an example types of things that Power BI is capable of doing. And so here we're kind of mixing just some text data kind of down the middle there with some graphs and charts around the data to support that. And so really what I wanted to do is kind of just take you to my Power BI site real quick, and this is not a session on Power BI by any means, but because in 2018, GP 2018, they have done some really deep hooks into the Power BI tools, and Microsoft has actually built about 36 Power BI charts and graphs that you can actually go use. And so there's a power pack, they call it, of sample reports that you can hook to your data and kind of get started. And so, and they will continue to add to those reports that are available on, as they release new versions of the product in the future. And so, but there's a little starter pack. And so this is my, like my real Power BI site. And I've created pulled in some dashboards that they had made available. And so, for example, procurement, so that's purchasing. If I click on that, you'll see that this goes and gets the data and renders those charts or graphs of the information that I have set up. And so this is pulling data from my Dynamics GP system, yet I'm running this off the Microsoft Power BI website, without a device, and so just through a browser. And of course, you could look at this on your phone, and iPhone, iPad, Android phone, it's completely agnostic to the operating system of the mobile device. And so if I wanted to drill down on this map of the US, which is the map that's actually running in GP back on my slide, and so then I can see here a little bit more detail about what's happening with my spending. And so, and of course, as I hover over some of these things, you know, I'll get additional information that's out there. And so this might look like somebody sat here and built some really extensive charts and graphs. I will tell you, I built none of these. I just pulled these from the library, so 100% free. And I have not done anything to this except sign myself up and made the connection. And so, and these Power BI is free. There is a paid version, so if you need something more extensive, it's $9.99, so $10 a month per user is the paid version. So still not a really expensive thing, but you can see just with a few clicks here that there's a lot of information available. And this is just kind of a next generation reporting for Microsoft Dynamics. And so we've had FRX and Management Reporter and some third parties that kind of fill in the gaps around some of what Microsoft has. We have Excel reports, we have SQL reporting services reports, Business Analyzer to collect those and put those on our GP homepage. This is kind of the next generation of reporting for Microsoft Dynamics. And so I think you will see more and more of this in the future and more hooks into the Dynamics system. And so if it's something that you know, you haven't really paid much attention to or kind of ignored, that's okay today. But you might at some point want to start learning a little bit about Power BI, because you will see, I think, great things happening with that, with your Dynamics system. And again, kind of back to the map up in the upper left-hand corner of the screen there, you see some of those charts and graphs actually running inside of my Dynamics GP of my homepage. And so very tight integration, 30 or 40 reports out there, reports meaning the types of things you see on the screen, available for free. Of course, you can edit those, you can create your own, and really do some really nice reporting with this tool. So anyway, enough of that. In GP 2018, there's deeper hooks. They did come out with the Power Pack. And so that's something that not a lot of people are aware of. Okay, so document attach, they have really extended this throughout the system. And so if you use the document attachment feature now, you'll know that it's a very nice feature. Really, they've done a nice job back in GP 2013 when they rewrote this, and really opens up a lot of functionality that we were kind of limping along with in prior versions. And so the doc attach in 2018 has been added to a lot of new windows. And so of course it's on the master records today. In 2018, they're adding that, or have added that, to a lot of the transaction inquiry windows, or the master record inquiry windows. And so here you see the doc attach on the receivables transaction entry. Well, when you drill back from just the inquiry window, you'll see that as well. And so that's really kind of extending the power of this feature. And when you see that on the inquiry window, that means that things that are entered on the master record, so for example, if you enter something into the document attach, whether it's text or you actually do attach a document, if you do that on the master record and then decide you want users to see those things on the inquiry window, so people that don't have access to the actual setup, the cards, so to speak, but do have inquiry access, they can see those documents. They could actually attach documents through the inquiry, which is a pretty big change for Dynamics GP. So inquiry was inquiry only. And so we now, through some setup and security, can grant users access to create their own or attach their own documents. And so here, the journal entry, transaction entry screen, the general journal kind of window here, you see the doc attach added. Same thing on the journal entry inquiry. So if we're just drilling back to transactions, we'll have access to that feature as well. So here we see on the employee inquiry, and so you'll notice the employee maintenance window in the background there. So if I go attach some documents, maybe a scanned application or you know, a direct deposit authorization or benefits letters that maybe the employees have signed, anything that I might scan into the employee maintenance or card window becomes available then in the employee inquiry window. And so, and you could give the inquiry user, so someone that doesn't have setup access but view only access, you could give them access to attached documents in addition to the documents that are there. So I-9, kind of part of payroll HR here. We always had the I-9 screen in the human resource module, but it was just the screen, so we still had a physical I-9 that was getting signed and filed away. Well, the idea here is that you could just scan that right into the I-9 window in the HR system, and then you have the original signed document, and that supports the data that you would put into the window here. Same thing on the vendor side as the customer, so identical here. Transaction information or master record information that gets entered kind of at the card or the maintenance level is available through the inquiry window as well. And you kind of see those new icons on the inquiry window. So same thing here on customers. Project accounting, if anybody uses that, sometimes project gets overlooked in some of the presentations that we do because we don't have a ton of people that use it, but they have added the document attached to the project system, and of course then those documents would flow out to the project inquiry windows as well, and so same idea there. Fixed assets, again, don't see a lot of cool stuff in fixed assets being added because it kind of does everything. There's not a whole lot to add, but now we have the document attachment feature here. So if you have purchase agreements or drawings or something that maybe instructions around the asset or a warranty document or owner's manual type thing that you wanted to scan in and make that a permanent part of the asset record, you can now do that in Dynamics GP 2018. So kind of to summarize the document attach piece, transaction entry windows and inquiry windows now have access to the doc attach. It's not just that master records, and of course the transaction entry windows have always had the ability to attach, but they've extended that with the windows that you see here on the screen. And then of course the inquiry windows that we talked about. So that's a good summary of kind of the windows that have been touched with this new part of the system. So, well, because of that, there's a little security around the doc attach feature now. So they have added, kind of highlighted there in the middle of the window, they've added the ability to say, yes, I want users to be able to attach documents to the inquiry windows. Sometimes you might not. You might just say, no, that's inquiry is inquiry. We're looking only, we're not doing anything. And so you could turn that off. But here you'll see I have mine turned on. And then, so that would allow them to see the documents that have been attached from the master records. Well, if you want them to actually be able to edit, so in other words, add their own, they could actually take documents off, then you could put a password on there for them that they could open up kind of the editing ability on an inquiry window for just this part of the system. And so pretty powerful and pretty user-friendly pieces around that. And so if you haven't looked into that, it's a good idea to check that out even in your current version. So then we get into user experience, and user experience, they've made a lot of different enhancements here. And so I'm not going to talk through all of these, but we'll look at several of them. A lot of, and again, remember user experience is productivity. So fewer mouse clicks, getting to data faster, things that, we just sit there and click all day. They try to figure out ways, and a lot of that comes from you and from us telling them, hey, it would really be nice if you could do this and that. And so that's how some of these things, many of these things get into the system and in 2018, and we'll get there in the future. And so you'll see a lot of things that really kind of streamline the clicks that we have to go through on a daily basis. And so here they've added additional sorts to receivables and payables in a banking system. And so you see here the receivables transaction inquiry window. You now have the ability to sort by the type of document. And so we always had document number and document date, and that's okay, but sometimes you want to see just payments. And so doc number and doc date is good, but if you got a gazillion sales documents in there, that's still pretty overwhelming. So we can now toggle by date, and you kind of see the new sort by line that's added between the actual scrolling part of the window and the traditional drop down there where document number shows up. You'll see I've got type, so in other words, payment, invoice, return, credit, whatever it might be. I can sort by document number, and of course I could do that today. Document amount, that's starting to become very helpful now. Amount remaining, so again, if you use this window a lot, you should light up a little bit, because that really allows you to get through to the data here much, much faster than what you do today. And then of course date. And you'll notice as part of the sorting, they've added ascending and descending. And so, we can sort by document amount, but then in ascending or descending order, instead of just scrolling through the screen, where you're trying to find a certain amount. And so that should really streamline kind of information that has to be retrieved from the system on a regular basis. And so we see that in receivables. We see that exact same thing in payables. And so of course, we don't have the amount remaining in payables. We have the unapplied amount, but same type of idea, same ascending, descending sequencing here of whatever our sort choice is. And so those have been pretty popular with people that have moved to 2018 already. So they've found a lot of time-saving steps that they don't have to go through, or they've kind of evaporated. And so pretty big, simple but big here. And then we see the same in the bank reconciliation. So if you use the bank rec part of Dynamics GP, they've actually added 2 fields to the sort by, so you can now sort by payment and deposit, and then also the ascending, descending. And so makes getting through the bank reconciliation window much more streamlined as well. Okay, so kind of summary of where they've added those filters are here: receivables, payables, and bank rec. This is on the slide, so if you happen to get a copy, I think Caitlin will post these to our website, and you'll all get a link on where the slides are. So if you go grab these, I put these kind of summary screens on here so you can see quickly on where those things apply and what the actual filters are. Okay, so system password. This is kind of a little one-off, but it's, every time you go into a system menu, you have to put in a password. And so if you have one, and so, that's just something we've all kind of grown accustomed to. Well, what they've done in 2018 is you only have to put the password in once to get into a system function. And any other time you open a system protected screen or menu item, you will not have to re-enter that password until you close your Dynamics GP. And so it's a session only setting where it saves it temporarily. Once you close down GP, then that password is no longer saved. And if you log out for lunch and you come back and you log back in, and you go into a system menu option, you'll have to re-put the password, but then that'll save that until you close it later in the day to go home. So again, a simple thing, but it's like, gee, that's actually kind of cool. So that could save a lot of time if you go in and out of a lot of system things. They have, this isn't a huge thing, but just to be a little more modern with the technology, they've renamed in the payables area, places that it used to say check, they've renamed to payment. So knowing that not everybody writes checks today the way that we all did years ago, a lot of times it's just a payment. It could be electronic funds transfer, it could be a credit card, it could be you know, a bank wire or whatever it might be. It still could be a check, which is fine, but they've just kind of rebranded the word check into payment. And so not anything major as far as changing the way the system runs. If you use the web client, not a lot of people do, but if you're one of those that do, you will now have the autocomplete feature available in the web client that previously did not work, and so that is functional just like it is in the desktop client. There's a Smart List Favorites password now, and you might think, well, we've already got that. Well, you do. If you create your own Smart List, you do have the ability to put a password, but it's for the entire system. So every user shares the same password, which kind of defeats the purpose of a password, if you ask me, if everybody has to have it. And so the original thinking was that, well, maybe just a few people would have it, and when you were going to save or edit a Smart List favorite, you'd go to somebody else and have them put the password in. Well, that was pretty clunky and somewhat unrealistic. So now every Smart List favorite that you create and save, you don't have to use the password, but you can optionally put your own password on it. So every Smart List favorite could have a unique password. So if I build a Smart List favorite and I make it available to everybody else in the system, I don't really want somebody to change that and make it their favorite because, I built it for me. And so this allows me to put my own password on it. Everybody else can use it, but nobody can open it and edit it. They could save it and create their own edits and then have their own, but they couldn't actually edit mine. And so that was a very, very big suggestion from the user base like you folks. And so that's where they got the idea for that. Also in the web client, if you do use that Smart List, they put a shortcut now on the web client kind of shortcut bar there, the banner that previously you had to navigate to, but there's a shortcut there. Again, kind of not a huge thing, but if you're a web client user, that drove people a little bit crazy. Same thing with the bank rec. Also in the web client, they added the ability to maximize that window. That window ran a little small and a little hard to see, and so you can make that window larger. So again, doesn't seem like a big thing unless you are a web client user and do bank recs, then it was kind of a nuisance. And so a couple of little features there for web client folks. So now kind of talking about the financial and HR along with the workflow enhancements. And again, I'm not going to read all of these. We'll kind of show you most of them. If you use analytical accounting, you know right now that the security access to set up a dimension in AA is a real pain, and it's very manual. And so they added the ability to copy access. So if you create a new dimension, you can go in and copy security across into the new dimension so that you'll be able to do this much, much faster and more efficient. Simple thing here, not a new piece of functionality per se, just a different way to get to it. So here, if we're on a customer card or the customer inquiry, we can actually generate and email a statement directly from the inquiry window or the card, the maintenance window for that customer. And so we don't have to go into routines and do a restriction and say produce a statement for just Aaron Fitz here. We can do that right from the open window. That was also a big customer suggestion. So here in the purchase order system, if we happen to use PO generator and take the suggested purchase orders. That creates the middle off to the window off to the left there in the middle of the screen, purchase order preview. From there, we can actually open a list of purchase orders that are created. And so the list view kind of in the lower kind of foreground there, they created that, so that that hasn't existed in the past. And so as we generate POs from PO Generator, if we use that, that will open a list of the purchase orders, and that actually opens automatically. And so you don't have to push a button or do anything, that just pops up so you can see the POs that are created. And why they built that is some people have PO Generator access and they actually create a purchase order, but they don't actually go into the purchase order and release it or further edit it. Their security stops at the creation part. And so I think that's why they were prompted to get this extra step in here. So as a user, I can see the POs I've created and I take a look at them. I might not have access to actually go to that PO and make edits to it. So if we do that, and if we, on our home page, have the requisition module plugged in here, today you don't see the PO that's linked to a requisition on your home page. Of course, that's in the system. Well, they did a quick little update here, and they actually added a column to the requisition list on my home page that allows me to see the purchase order number for that requisition. And so it's kind of a no-brainer. It just wasn't there, but that's kind of a nice addition if you use the requisition and have that little plugin on your home page. You can print now a requisition, and so if you do happen to use the requisition part of the system, it's pretty slick overall. It's got nice workflow on it, but we now can actually print out a requisition, and so it's not well, it's what you see on the screen, so it's just a report, but it at least gives a user, sometimes they want to keep a copy of that. You know, we're still in love with paper a lot of times. Sometimes we need a copy of it, or we just want to look at it before we kind of submit it on, or who knows, you know, there's a lot of people need to go look at data. And so if there's something that needs to get printed out here, you actually can print a fairly nice report. And this is a report writer report, as you can tell, which means it can be edited in report writer, in the GP report writer. And so they built that and tucked that onto the requisition entry window. Hold status and sales order processing. So here, sales transaction entry. If you've been on the software a while, you'll remember the stop sign that used to light up if we put a transaction on hold. That went away in the new interface here. Well, they brought that back, and so if this document does have a hold assigned to it, it now puts a visual cue on the main sales transaction entry window here, so we can see the stop sign from days gone by and quickly glance and know that this document is on hold. And the cool little thing is you can actually double click on the stop sign and open the holds window, so they're very proud of that. In payables, so check selection, you probably know now on the right-hand side when you build a batch of checks, you can toggle the setting there that I've got marked and do one payment. So in other words, one check per vendor or one payment per invoice. Well, they've moved that back to the vendor. So the screen on the left, you'll see now that in the vendor options, we actually have that setting. And so we toggle that now by vendor instead of by batch. And so in the batch window on the right, every check in the batch would follow that rule. So if we said we want one payment for vendor, then all invoices for the vendor would get swept into one payment as we process typically checks. And it was just that way for the entire batch. Well, now we look back to the vendor setup and we see what the vendor should do. So you might have, 5 vendors in a batch and 3 of them are set to make one payment per vendor. The other two are set to make one payment per invoice. And so that was a strong suggestion from the installed base as well. And so that's a pretty nice thing in 2018 if you do a lot of payables. Here, when we do select checks in the build batch window, we can actually create a payment ID, which is a new field, and give it a name, and we can actually save that payment ID, and that saves all the settings. All of our selections on that window are saved, and then we can come back and reuse that. And so actually anybody could reuse it, and so it's not just the person that created it. And so those payment IDs then sit out there and allow us to not have to fill this window out every time if there's certain things that we just want to reuse as far as settings. On into payroll and HR, there's a garnishments report. Well, there wasn't a toggle in the posting setup to print or send that to the screen or ask, and so they did add that. That wasn't a huge thing, but kind of an annoyance if you printed that garnishments report. Also in payroll and HR, if you make changes now to pay codes, deductions, benefits, and shift codes, you do have the option now with a new question that pops here. You can roll those down to every payroll record, so all current and all history, or you can just roll that down to active records. And so if somebody's set to inactive, you probably don't want to go back and change the pay code or the deduction code that they actually used. You just want to change people that are working today. And so they added that functionality, which is pretty big for payroll users. If you use professional services tools, you know there's some payroll code modifiers. What we couldn't get to is the department here, and so they did add the department into the PSTL or professional services tool library for payroll code modification. Much like the accounting system, where we can look up information and exclude inactives, so inactive customers, vendors, items, accounts, and so on. They extended that into part of the payroll system, well, all the payroll system really, so where we look at deductions and benefits and employee and so forth, we have the ability now to exclude inactive codes. We had it in employees, we didn't really get it. They didn't get it all the way down into the deduction and benefit section, so they kind of stopped about halfway. Well, in 2018, they've kind of finished that out. Workflow, you can now send a reminder workflow and set, you'll see the yellow arrow there, you can set how many hours the reminder workflow should wait before it fires off. So if somebody doesn't pick up the workflow assignment and take some action on it, you can send them a reminder email, and you see a copy of that reminder there, just kind of a boilerplate, some of the text that Microsoft has provided. Of course, you can edit what that might look like, and so to kind of jog them along to approve that. You can copy workflow setups now. So if you're creating sub-steps, for example, so you'll see here on vendor approvals and you know, if you have requisitions or purchase orders based on dollar amounts and you have steps where 0 to 500, 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 2,000, well, right now you have to build every step from scratch. Here you'll be able to copy the steps and then quickly just go in and rename and change the parameters. So the idea is that you'll be able to create workflow steps much faster. There's now a history workflow report, so the auditors will like this if you deal with auditors. This will show the history of every transaction, and so you can sort this by type of workflow. So, you know, GL accounts, payables, transactions, or batches. You can sort it by or filter it by approvers, by the status of the workflow, or the date. So you could do a date range and say, hey, show me all the workflows that were approved last month, and well, all the workflows that got triggered last month. And the nice thing about the report is they really went the extra distance and they pulled all the comments onto the report. And so if you use workflow, you know that when you initiate or submit something to the workflow, there's a little comment box. that you can type in when the approver provided they're inside of GP, when the approver takes some action against it, they can type some comments. Well, those comments are printed off on the report. And so it's a pretty nice historical report that shows the workflow activity for a particular transaction. A few more things in the system to pull into the workflow. This is around payables, and it's really allows a little more data to flow into the workflow approvals so that the approvers can see a little bit more information about the transaction. Account description has been added to the workflow for purchasing. So if we, the account number was in there before, so somebody'd get a workflow and it's supposed to do account, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they're like, oh, I don't know, is that the right, is that the right thing? Well, they've added the account description, so people generally know the descriptions a little better than they do the numbers, and so that's just a little thing, but a highly requested thing. They've added the banking information to vendor approval part of the workflow. So, if you are asked to approve a vendor transaction and it's an electronic funds transfer, well, you might want to see the bank and information to know that, yeah, okay, that sounds right, and if we're sending it to a vendor and the bank is, is my bank, that's not good. So new workflow for GL accounts. So we've had GL batch approval since the workflow came out. In 2018, they added GL accounts. So if you're going to add a new general ledger account to the system, you can optionally put a workflow on that and have that be sent out so someone could approve that new account going into the system before it's actually available to use. And also added is a receivings transaction workflow. So we have the requisition workflow, we have PO workflow and approvals. We now have a receiving transaction workflow, so we could have that approved before we get the receiving document finalized. The other side of that is the purchasing invoice. So we now have the ability to put approvals around that invoice that came from that receipt. And of course, we've had the accounts payable transaction. We've had the accounts payable batch workflow. So now we can approve it at the requisition. We could approve the PO. We could approve the receipt. We could approve the invoice. We could approve the batch. That's probably a little aggressive for one transaction, but you see there's a lot of places in there that you can grab approvals. Not everybody would do all of those, of course, but you can pick something along the way. Maybe you don't care about the PO so much. You want to just catch it at the receipt, because that's really when it makes an entry into the accounting system for the most part. And so maybe that's where you decide you want to put your approvals. So lots of flexibility here added by putting in these two things into the workflow engine. So, well, how do we get there? If you're on GP 2013, you can't go direct. Most of you know, if you've been on the software, you can't skip a version. You can't, if you're too far back, you can't skip too many versions. And so you would have to go from 13 to something else, 15, 16, and then on to 18. If you are on GP 2015 or 16, you can go directly to GP 2018, but you have to be on a certain version of 15 and a certain version of 16. And you see the version 15 there, you'd have to be on 14000898, which was the 2015 year end. So 2 years back, really. So hopefully if you're on 15, you've applied at least that or something in the last couple of years. So if you're 0898 or later, then you could go directly to 2018. If you're on GP 2016 and you've applied the 2016 mid-year patch, so almost a year ago, if you applied the 2017 year end, if you applied the, I guess that's a year and a half ago, right, mid-year 2016. If you've applied any other service pack since then you will have a higher version number on your 2016 in the 0439, and so you would be good. But if you're older than either one of those, you would have to patch your existing system with at least those patch 2015 year end or the 2016 mid-year to bring yourself up to at least those levels, and then from there you could jump directly to GP 2018. If you're on 2013, again, you would want to hop over to 2015 or 2016 and then on to 2018. So you have that kind of double hop or that double step to get to 2018. If you're on something older than 2013, you can still upgrade, but you just have multiple steps to go there. And so it's completely doable. You're never really cut off. You just have more work to do to get current. So I wanted to, in the last couple of minutes, just talk about when support ends for some of these products. So GP 2013, you probably have heard somewhere along the line, maybe from us, hopefully, but 2013 support ends in 68 days. So April 10th, there will be no more updates to 2013. And so if you're on 2013, especially if you run payroll, you don't have to upgrade before April 10th, but you want to do it sometime in the next few months so that you're poised to get the year-end updates for your system next fall. So if the W-2 layout changed or the 1099 layout changed, you would not get those from Microsoft. So 2015, which means 15 and 15R2. We've got a couple of more years, so we've got until April 14th of 2020. 2016 or 2016 R2, we've got until 2021, and then of course 2018 mainstream support would not end until January of 2023. I put up here the extended support days and then a chart over on the right on what's considered mainstream support and what's considered extended support. And so mainstream support is really the one you kind of watch because that gets you the service packs, the updates, anything that Microsoft does to the software. When mainstream support ends, those end for your product if you're past that mainstream support date. Extended support means that you can still call, and this is assuming you were to call Microsoft, you can still call us. We're not going to stop supporting 2013. If we needed to call Microsoft after 4/11 of 23, then they would not talk to us. They would say, nope, we don't support that. If you called Microsoft on 4/15 of 23 and said, hey, my GP 2013's crashed, I don't know what to do, no more extended support. They're not going to take your money because they're not going to help you. And so, so this is kind of a nice chart. You see what happens with mainstream and what happens with extended. And so, but the critical thing, again, even if you're not on payroll, the critical thing is no more service packs or new features after mainstream support. So keep those dates in mind. If you are on an older version, it is time to start to seriously think about getting to something more current. Okay, and then the last thing is just the roadmap. Some of this over on the left is stuff that's already happened. So we're kind of the third pillar from the right. GP 2018 has shipped December 1st of 2017. Sometime in the second half of this calendar year, we'll have another version. We don't know yet if that's going to be GP 2018 R2 or if that would be GP 19. We don't know what that would be called or how it would be branded, but sometime this year, and the second half of this year does not mean July 1st. That normally means December to Microsoft. And so we probably will see another version released. But again, my gut feeling is, based on their history here that you can see, is that might be 2018 R2, but we don't know that. And then GP, whatever it's going to be next, would be sometime in GP 29 or calendar year 2019. And so It doesn't help that the product now has the year on it, and so it makes it a little bit confusing. And so they don't extend this out too far because they don't know what things will be called and what they'll be putting into the system. And so don't be alarmed that the roadmap doesn't end in 2019 by any means. They just don't publish this too far in advance because technology changes so rapidly. It's very, very difficult to say, when they might come out with a version, and if it's going to be an R2 or a full version, it'll have enough features that it will be worthy of having a full version. And so contact info, if you need us for anything, is up here. Interdyne BMI on the left. If you're with Tridea, our sister company out on the West Coast, you probably know how to get a hold of those folks. But Caitlin, any questions sitting out there that we can answer in the last couple of minutes?
Yes, I have a question. I know you kind of had touched on this, but I figured I would ask anyways. It's we are on GP 2010. Where do we go to from here?
Okay, so 2010, that's a good question. And so what you would want to do is you'd want to get from 10 to something current. And so maybe, did you say 2010 or 10?
Sorry, 2010.
2010, okay, so 2010 probably to 2015, so you can go from 2010 to 2015 and then from 2015 to 2018 if you wanted to be really right up to date. And so that's not uncommon, and there's still lots of people running 2010. It's just an extra step, but you can definitely get current.
Okay, and then I did just have a question related to that. Someone asked, how about from 10?
From 10, well, the same thing, 10 to 2010 or 2013, and then on to 2016, 2018. You can always get to the current version. There's never a path that's going to be blocked, but from 10, you just have an extra step to get current, but 10 to 2013, and then on either 2015, 16, on to 2018. So you kind of have 3 steps there. The 2010 people have a couple, but not impossible at all.
Okay, it looks like there are no more questions coming in right now. So if there's no additional questions, I would like to thank you all again for attending today's presentation. And thank you, Bryan, for giving us a great overview of Dynamics GP 2018 and how to get upgraded to it. And if you do have any later questions that do come up, please feel free to reach out to us. And you will be receiving a follow-up email from me with a link to the recording. So yeah, thank you, everyone. And we hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right, thank you all, and thank you, Caitlin.